Greetings, UUCC music lovers, and especially our wonderful Chalice series patrons in Maestri. It's so nice to be present again in our beautiful sanctuary, about to play a short recital for you on our Mason and Hamlin piano. I certainly miss playing for you live, hearing and sensing your bodies, spirits, and ears in the room, but this will have to be an adequate substitute for the moment. Back in the summer, when I realized that we'd likely have to cancel at least the fall Chalice concerts, it was suggested that perhaps I could offer a solo recital for folks virtually. The idea made good sense to me, so here I am. I want you to know that I've continued daily practice over the last 9 months, so no moss has grown on me during the pandemic, and this extended interval has given me an opportunity to learn some pieces I had always wanted to know a little more intimately. So I'm happy to share them with you, as well as take the time to also acknowledge and remember the recent passing of my beloved Peabody piano teacher and mentor, Leon Fleischer. While I've been lucky to have many musical mentors in my life, including Tom Benjamin, Fleischer was the most high-profile, famous keyboard guru that I had the privilege to study with. And indeed, all his students were shocked and saddened at his passing back in August, even though he lived a very full life until the age of 93. I'll speak a little more about him later. Before I begin playing, and it is my intention to tell you a little bit or a little something about each piece I'm sharing, I want to first take a little time out to say thanks to both Chris Horn and Sean Griffin and Jay Paul, who was here earlier. They're here with me tonight in the sanctuary assisting in this endeavor, Chris doing the audio recording and Sean on video. And thank you both for your generosity and time. I want to start off the program by offering a rare work of Frédéric Chopin, one that you've likely never heard before, the Variations Brillantes, Opus 12. It's an early work that was written in 1833 when he was about 23 years old. While it isn't one of Chopin's deepest and most profound compositions, it's nonetheless charming in its operatic influence and shows off the capabilities of the instrument well in a nice variety of textures and characteristic styles. You can definitely hear an early nod to what Chopin was to later become as a more mature composer down the road. The next piece I'd like to share is also likely unfamiliar to most of you, the single movement Franz Schubert Sonata in F-sharp minor. This hauntingly beautiful work was, like the Eighth Symphony, unfinished and not published during Schubert's lifetime. It was written in 1817, but not published until 1888. We aren't exactly sure why Schubert decided to abandon the work. You'll hear that it is quite uniquely beautiful in conjuring up a remote, melancholy world. I'll be playing a finished version of this sonata movement, completed for us by a musical scholar. Next, in homage to my teacher, Leon Fleischer, I'd like to turn to an old and familiar work that I studied with him, the slow movement from the Big F minor piano sonata of Johannes Brahms. I played this work for my first graduate recital at Peabody and have many fond memories of my lessons with it, with Mr. Fleischer on this piece. This movement is to me like an epic journey of romantic love, at times tender and yearning, at times passionate and ecstatic. In a rare moment of something that Brahms rarely did, he notates an excerpt of a poem by Sternau at the beginning of the movement that translates, "Through evening's shade, the pale moon gleams. Two hearts in love united hold one another, blissfully surrounded." It's difficult to properly express the enormous impact of such a significant and imposing piano figure like Leon Fleischer. He was a towering, godlike musical giant to many of us, especially those fortunate to have studied with him, and he only accepted one or two new students every year. We have all very fond memories of those profound group lessons on the upper fourth floor of the conservatory building, where we sat in and listened to one another's lessons, and were recipients of constant and thoughtful pearls of wisdom that Leon dispensed on a weekly basis, where with his eyeglasses perched atop his head and his eyes closed, patiently waiting for the divine words that fit both the piece being played and suitable phrases that he often uttered as a particular student struggled. There are so many pithy things that he said. A couple of weeks after he died, a Facebook Messenger group was created where hundreds of pupils all over the globe whose lives he had touched immensely offered musical pieces dedicated to him, as well as verbal reminiscences about the impact of his teaching and person. I feel very fortunate to have had his influence on me for a number of years, and remember fondly his outsized frame and intimidating musical presence beside me at the piano, playing along with his one good left hand and conducting me with his right. It will always be unforgettable. This Brahms sonata movement is dedicated to you, Leon. I hope I don't let you down. Now I'd like to offer another middle movement of a big piano sonata, but this time by the Black female American composer Florence Price, whose music is enjoying a worthy revival of sorts these days. Ms. Price is one of our most important Black classical composers and the first Black female composer to ever have her work performed by a major orchestra. She was born in Arkansas in 1887 and died in Chicago in 1953. Educated at the New England Conservatory of Music in Boston, Price later migrated with her family during the Jim Crow era from the Deep South to Illinois. She continued studying and writing music, and her compositions began to achieve national recognition. She wrote many pieces for various different solo instruments and ensembles, and this sonata of hers was submitted for a composition contest, which won first prize in 1932. For me, Price melds her obviously prodigious classical music education with an independent voice of her own that combines folk elements of the Deep South with more complex structural forms. There are characteristic Americana folk tunes in this movement, and I hear influences of Dvorak, Strauss, and other turn-of-the-century composers. Her music is deserved of so much more attention on the concert stage, so I'm happy to introduce her to you if you're unaware of her name. Now I'd like to turn to Beethoven to a kind of round out the influence of my teacher, Leon Fleischer. A student of the great Arthur Schnabel, Fleischer was a part of a chain of direct lineage to Beethoven and a great pedagogical tradition of both piano playing and teaching. So I'm happy to report that I was fortunate to be a part of that direct line as well, whose ancestry goes something like this. Beethoven taught Karl Czerny, who taught Franz Liszt, who taught Theodor Leschetizky, who taught Arthur Schnabel, who taught Leon Fleischer, who taught me. Very cool, huh? Being primarily an orally related tradition, surely much great information about music making was passed down from teacher to student, even if slightly filtered over the centuries. Both Fleischer and Schnabel were famous for recordings of Beethoven, in particular the piano sonatas and concertos. I'd like to play a short but wickedly playful and difficult piece that Beethoven wrote as part parody, the famous Rondo alla Ungherese, Quasi un capriccio, Opus 129, more well known as The Rage Over a Lost Penny. Gotta have at least one show-off piece on this recital for you. Finally, to end and wrap up the recital with a nod to Chopin, another nod to Chopin, I'd like to conclude with a beautiful but short piece of the 20th century American composer George Crumb called Dream Images, or Love-Death Music. This is part of a large group of pieces that Crumb wrote for the piano called Macrocosmos. Crumb is an important 20th century avant-garde composer. He's still alive, by the way, at the age of 91. He was most famous for exploring unusual musical timbres, prepared instruments, alternative forms of notation, and extended instrumental and vocal techniques. In Dream Images, Crumb sets up a quasi-hallucinogenic meditative state, interspersed with direct quotes from the second theme of Chopin's famous Fantasy Impromptu. The opening performance indication reads, musingly, like the gentle caress of a faintly remembered music. It is a unique and hauntingly beautiful work, which simultaneously pays homage to the tradition of Chopin's work, while at the same time surrounding it with a modern aesthetic. I hope you enjoy it.